The theme of this talk today is about the role of indigenous wisdom. And when it says today, and I want that to be understood that when I say today, I mean after the 2012 and after all that has happened in terms of the public opinion and the public understanding of what the Mayan calendar and what the Mayans were saying about 2012. Because what the Mayans said is very different to what a lot of people have said, and very different to what all the films have said. Specifically, there's an institution in the United States called the Echelon Institution, and with this, or the Echelon Institute, and with this, through this institute, there have been a lot of people that have gone through there. John Major Jenkins, the other guy, what's his name, Terence McKenna. A lot of people have been the very, very big pluggers of the 2012 Cosmic Global Awakening thing, have been connected through this institute in the United States. And when you actually trace back what they say and where they hear it from, it all comes up as hearsay. And the Mayans themselves, they say something very different. The Mayans say that come 2012, on that day, if you imagine like a table, and on one side you got a metallic surface, on the other side you got like a wooden surface. You set off a spin top, and that spin top is spinning from one surface to the next, and when it changes, that was the date that they were specifying. But that spin top doesn't explode and turn into kaleidoscopic colours and, everyone getting experience. That spin top keeps on spinning a few times until we notice any differences in the culture. Because what the Mayans had is that their understanding and their consciousness was far greater than our own interpretation. They weren't so material, and they were very much connected to much more to the cosmos and celestial forces. And so there was this idea, and very much plugged through the media as well, of there being some great big event, plugged as the Mayan thing, that the Mayans have predicted this. And obviously when it didn't happen, and it would just seem like an ordinary day, we ourselves, and I was living in Colombia at this time, in a community that was focused in shamanism, and we noticed that at this time, straight after, there was a very big rejection, almost like a mass rejection of the indigenous wisdom. And I think a lot of people took what Hollywood said and what all the films said and all the things through Echelon Institute said as being something that the Mayans said. But the Mayans didn't say there was going to be an end of the world or a global consciousness. What the Mayans really said was there's going to be changes. Starting from this day, is going to be all the processes that this humanity and this planet has to go through in order to break ourselves from the current system that is currently controlling us. What they said specifically was that there is going to be a big summer. That at some point there's going to be a summer that starts and does not stop, and the heat increases. Which is quite interesting, because when all this stuff for the Echelon Institute came out, and they were speaking about this global, consciousness, cosmic awakening thing, the US scientists were saying, well, there might be global warming in the future. So there's been like an interesting trick there where the US hierarchy, the echelons high up in the US government, have known what the Mayans have said. Through their scientists, they've said what the Mayans said, and they've given to the public to feed to everyone else like a wonderland, something that was not what the Mayans said. And so now you get to a point where the people have rejected everything indigenous. The people are there thinking that there's nothing in there, because the Mayans, which didn't say anything of this stuff, has not come true, has not come to light. And obviously the scientists are now plugging this global warming thing, which is what the Mayans said. That's what the Mayans said, that there's going to be global warming and a great big summer that's coming. Which is interesting, because when you think of the biblical prophecies, they say there's going to be the destruction by fire, which ties in hand with this great big summer that's coming. Now, there's a story in Olmecan legends in South America about Noah, because the Aymara, indigenous people of Bolivia, they can trace their ancestry all the way back high up into the Andes to the point that they call the Isle of the Sun, which is in Lake Titicaca. And this Isle of the Sun, obviously all the sacred sites through here, through Glastonbury, Stonehenge, I think Avery actually, to St. Michael's Mount goes through this island, the Isle of the Sun. And the Aymara say that this island was the original Ark of Noah. And that this place was where, when the floods came, that Ark got stranded in this place. And then the floods proceeded. And they say that around this time, when there are all the stories of the floods and all the stories of the people just thought it was ridiculous. No, there's not going to be any floods. No, there's not going to be anything. And that Noah himself was ridiculed. That when he was building the ark, people were taking all the mick out of him. But he was doing the will of God. He was doing something that was beyond himself, doing a service. And you have to wonder whether how many people are going to start taking what the Mayans say and the Indigenous say seriously. First there's going to be a summer, and then a heat wave, and then war, which is fire. All that starts taking off, all things that are prophesied. And one has to wonder at what point are we going to start taking what they say seriously. Okay. The actual, the idea of the title of this conference also was inspired by a conference that a shaman gave in just after this 2012 event. And someone asked him, what is the role of shamanism and the role of the Indigenous in these times? And he gave a very sort of just one-line answer, which I didn't really understand at the time, but I took that and I thought about it a while. And what he said was that the role of shamanism and the Indigenous wisdom in this time is to teach people what is good and to teach people what is evil and to train people how to do good. I found that quite interesting because coming from here and having reading a lot of philosophies where obviously good and evil has really not been a very accurate description of these forces, and I think a lot of people can appreciate or emphasize with the idea that these terms good and evil do not really serve to describe what it is that is behind these things of good and evil. And as far as we understand in the community, or what stories have come down, that these concepts, good and evil, were concepts that were created by a monk in an ancient humanity, Atlantis. And in this humanity, he was trying to form an idea of natural processes. And these natural processes, one of them we know of. One of these processes is very well put out in the media. It is the religion or the religion, but it is only one half of the process. And we understand that that life, on the organic life, evolves from seed, if you like, that it grows, it comes up, it sprouts, it comes up, it gives arms, it gives branches, flowers, it pollinates, and then it fecundates, and then it goes to seed. Once you get the seed and the seed drops, then that plant, going through all the evolution, begins to then rot, to decay, to wither, to fall down, to turn into compost. And so you have this other law, which is involution. So you have the theory of evolution, where things go up to a certain point, and then nature has involution, where things degenerate and come back down, back to the ground level again. And really in the scientific, the way we've been brought up in our conditioning, just says there is evolution and there is nothing more, just evolution. Which is a trap, obviously, because there is much more than evolution. Everything grows to a point, then it decays and it gets old. People, plants, rocks, society, civilizations all go through this process of evolution and involution. And this monk in Atlantis, he wanted to do good. He wanted to help humanity as best as he thought he could. And so his idea was to take all processes that were evolutionary and call them good. And then all processes that are involutionary or in involution and call them bad. And his idea was that by giving this idea of good and bad, people would be able to into the mysteries a bit deeper. But the actual result is that he has created a very great block on all of us through these concepts that we have in our head of good and evil. Because rather than good and evil, there's evolution and there's involution. And in the plants that's evolving, there is all the process of its involution. They're encoded. And in the plants that has dropped its seed and is involuting, there is everything given the compost to start evolution. So we understand that there is good in the bad, and that there is bad in the good. And that it's not just a case of putting things there as good and there as bad, but it's necessary to understand the whole cycle of what goes on. And following this, he also said, someone also asked him in the same conference, the shaman who gave this conference, what is the difference between shamanism and sorcery? And he said, because this is something quite confused, people hear this concept of shamanism, it's been spoken quite a lot and it's been made very popular, and people have sort of taken it and made it their own form and turned it into their own thing, and it's gone away from what it originally meant, because the word shaman comes from Siberia, and it was their word to describe someone who healed people using the tools that God and Pachamama gave us, the plants, the minerals, the spirits of the earth, that they had a capacity to communicate with these spirits and use them for healing. And that sorcery, so in that sense, shamanism is the art of doing good, is the art of healing people, of being able to heal someone. Whereas sorcery is the art of causing someone injury, of using the same elemental forces of nature, but doing stuff to cause injury, to cause ill will, to create division or dissension between people. And in that sense, when one is learning through shamanism or through plants, as a lot of people have experienced, there's the need to define oneself. How to describe that better? Kind of. Obviously here I give a picture of it being black and white, but it's black and white, and in many sense none of us are black or white. All of us to a certain extent are grey, because we all have in us the heart and the soul that comes through in birth. But as we grow up, and we grow up in this society, this false society which is not connected to nature, we are in a society that is like the cult of personality, and we have to be the society makes us constantly aware of who we are externally, how people see us, how we should be, how we're supposed to be. Can I do this? Can I say that? Can I move my arm now? Things like this, which is all about the external and about the personality. And a child does not have personality until the age of 7, and once the age of 7, then everything that goes into that child psychically is kind of crystallized into their personality. And everything that there is crystallized is the karma of that person, who then has to live with that, well, for the rest of their life, or work with it, either be buried by it or overcome it. And obviously in these energies that come into the child and the personality, you have evolutionary processes, things that are good, things that are positive, and then you have involutionary processes as well. And so in a sense all of us are grey, because all of us contain a part of us that is evolving and a part of us that is decaying. It says in the Bible itself that one needs to do more than just good. That it's not, to really get into the kingdom of heaven, it's, you need to go beyond good. That it's not just about our idea of trying to do the good. Because really, if we have both processes going on inside us, and every process is the seed of the other process, then what we think is good in this moment can later on become something very destructive and can cause damage. Like this Atlantean monk who came up with these theories because he thought he was doing something good, helping people to evolve and for them to find the path. In that sense, the first stages of shamanism is, or to be learning shamanism, is through self-observation, and through, we can say, intense self-observation of all the processes that go on inside us, to the point that we are extracting the psychic energy from what's going on in our psychology. And in that sense, the shaman there at the community said that there are two ways to use the elemental spirits, use medicinal medicines. One is for healing, for your own healing, physical ailments or psychological problems, and the other is for self-discovery, to use the plants to go as a microscope, to go into oneself and to understand ourselves deeper. And that the second, to use the plants for self-discovery, is a lot harder. And it's definitely not as easy as a lot of books on the New Age and the spirituality have been painting up that to be. That when actually one starts walking it, it is extremely difficult. Okay, there's a thing here where it says, I think it's Gurdjieff that says, in this term of self-realization, that it's impossible to realize oneself without realizing the world at the same time, because we're all the microcosm of the macrocosm, or something greater, and the world itself is a microcosm of that. And so you cannot know, it's impossible to self-realize without knowing the mysteries of the earth. And so the earth mysteries and self-realization go hand in hand. And interesting, I'm not sure if any of you caught the talk of Hugh Newman yesterday when he was speaking about the giants and about these races, and even photos of, if I had the projector here, I'll show you a photo of a giant they uncovered in Bolivia, with a man standing in its pelvis region, a tiny man, and this giant is huge, with a JCB at the end of this giant. And this same has been discovered in Saudi Arabia, massive, huge giants. And this obviously does not fall into the Western model of evolution. You know, where do these giants fit in? So obviously, our society and the way we've been conditioned to think and perceive the world is extremely faulty. It's based on a half-truth, evolution, but there's the other half-truth, which is degeneration and involution. And that's a lot how the, how can you say, the evil forces or the degenerate forces on this planet work, that they use a bit of truth to put something in there, and they take away everything else, and you're stuck with this one truth that actually you'll just go around in circles and never actually overcome it. So our understanding through different indigenous groups, for instance the Kogi, they say that a lot of animals that you see, ants for instance, bees, that we did not come from them, that there are many animals that came from us. For instance, they say that the monkeys and the apes were tribes that split off from the kind of solar civilizations of Atlantis and Lemuria, and the older races as well, and that these tribes, when they split off, they got more animalistic and got really into a degeneration, that when big changes came, little by little, they changed back into animal. In that sense, there's a spiritual hierarchy there, which the Kogi, who are in North Colombia, I'm not sure if you have heard of the Kogi, that there is a spiritual hierarchy on the planet, which is very different to what we understand as hierarchy, because we think of hierarchy and we think of, I got the right to boss you around and tell you to go over there and all this, but that's not how the world of spirit works in its hierarchy. It's very, very different. And from what their understanding is that, first, another thing that, another fallacy of science is that it's trying to look for the cause of everything, the cause of where humanity came from. But a lot of indigenous groups say humanity came from the stars, that humanity came from the higher superior worlds that condensed and condensed until it became physical. And so science, materialistic science, trying to find a materialistic cause for this humanity which got born from the spirit, it's never going to find it. And what we understand in this process on this planet with this humanity, and it's where it is in the spiritual hierarchy, is that organic life is mechanical, that there are mechanical laws which make life, organic life, flourish here. And the first life is like mineral, the base, the rock, clay, if you like. As they say, Adam was born from clay. And then from the rocks and the minerals, when they break up, they then feed the plants. And the plants, if you like, they say God is asleep in the stones, and he starts waking up in the plants. God becomes animated in the animals, and in the human being, God has the chance to self-realize that the human being is in a position, still propelled by mechanical forces and mechanical nature, but is in a position to free itself from all the mechanical laws that the organic life has. With these races, obviously we know of Atlantis, and people are probably familiar with Lemuria, In terms of here, and our understanding is that there are older humanities. Hyperborea is an older humanity to Lemuria, which were a race of giants in which the Nordic myths are connected very much to the Hyperboreans. And our understanding, when you hear the thing of Hyperborean mystery connected to stone circles, then this was these giants, our ancestors, way millions of years ago, who made the stone circles in these megaliths. And before the Hyperborea, you have another race which we understand as polar. And these older races were not physical material races in terms of the physical plane, the physical world. They were races that were etherical and in the vital body or astral. Obviously, as creation, if you like, unfolds from the higher worlds down, as it unfolded, it came through spirit, and then it came down and condensed in the physical world, and then it actually goes down further into the lower worlds and keeps on going, and to a point until basically all of creation starts coming back and gathering itself back in on itself. And that creation follows certain laws, and one of the laws is the law of seven, which is in the musical scale that you get do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, back to do, which is the first again. You get the 7 colours of the rainbow, you've got the 7 chakras, you've got the 7 celestial planets, and that humanity itself unfolds, as well as our chakra system, but the human race itself is unfolding in the law of 7. And that we've had the polar race, the Hyperborea, the Lemurian race, Atlantis, and then ourselves. And not many people are familiar with the term of what the word Aryan means, because there's been a bit of confusion about what the term Aryan actually means. In the 1920s or something, there were German occultists, esoteric people who left Germany because they felt that what was going on there was not correct, that it wasn't divinely inspired with the socialism that they were trying to give to humanity. And so there were occultists that left Germany and came to South America, and they took with them their interpretation of what Aryan was. And Aryan, the original interpretation to them, was the race that we are. The blacks, the Chinese, everyone who is human, they classify as Aryan. And obviously we have a misinterpretation of this because Hitler and the Nazis took Aryan to be just the white people, the white European, which is one of its very many flaws. So when I say Aryan, I hope you understand, and I'm scared people are going to come and I say Aryan, they're going to be running out. And I say Aryan, I mean blacks, Chinese, Tibetan, all of us. As far as the German occultists and what they say, the original Rosicrucian sects that left Germany, their idea of Aryan is this race, like the Atlantis, like Lemuria. We're now in the Aryan race. And we have 2 more races that are going to come to complete the whole cycle before what they call the Great Cosmic Day comes back in on itself and all goes back to the Absolute. In this moment, in this Aryan race, this law of 7 repeats itself in every race. You get a note on a scale and you know that note is the 5th, but that note itself has got all the harmonics in itself as well, of itself. So in every race, that race then unfolds itself in 7 again. And you think, I was speaking earlier about Noah and about the last destruction from Atlantis, and they say there were 2 places where survivors landed in boats, because there were a few boats. One was in the Andes, where the Isle of the Sun, which the Aymara say was the original Noah's Ark, and the other is in the Himalayas, which is also high up in the Andes as well, high up in the mountains, pardon. There are other tribes such as the Hopi, and they say they came out of the earth. And there are other tribes that basically say that they were in caves and they came out of caves. So it's not just these 2, but these are 2 examples of this survival after the floods. And so from there, you have this birth of what we call the Aryan race, which is all races, all people. And you see an interesting synthesis here of how in Latin America, and when I say America, there's South America, Central, and there's North America. People say American, they think North, but America comes from Aymara, and it also comes from Amaru, which is the solar serpent, the people of the solar serpent. And so it's good to know this when you go and you speak to Latin Americans. You say America, they're They think you mean the whole of continent, it's north, south, and central. And so the Americans, or from Noah in Bolivia, that this civilization basically has been intact. And that's why when you go to Tibet and you see the language in Tibet and you see the Mayan language, that it's so obvious that there are similarities. I've never seen it myself, but people say that it's pretty much the same language. The words, the alphabet, the way they speak, the dialects, and the bone structure as well. When you look at them, the Tibetan and the Mayans, they are similar. They are undeniably of the same root, and they both come from the mountains as well after the floods. And so this unfolding of the seven, and this is just this is actually more red. This next bit, what I'm going to say, and I recommend that people go with it and try and investigate it and see what they come up with it. But from what we understand, that the Tibetan and the Chinese, that there was the first subrace of the Aryan race, and that flourished in China, which is why civilization starts in China and gradually goes west. And then you have Hindustan, and then you have the Persian civilizations, and then it goes to Egypt. And then, with the cycle of evolution and involution, obviously Egypt was a very, very advanced civilization, and they knew a great amount of elemental and celestial magic that today we cannot even begin to comprehend. And that the Aryan race was at its peak in Egypt. And that's why after Egypt, you have other civilizations that go back to Persia, that go back to India, because those civilizations came on. But what was going on is you could say the seed, the human genetics or the human seed of the race has gone from the Himalayas to China to India to Persia to Egypt. After that, went to Greece and Rome, and came up to through the Mediterranean, and what we understand as the fifth subrace. They say that in Greece, during this time and with all the philosophy that came out, at the time that the philosophy came out, there was a human faculty got atrophied in that point. And that human faculty is the faculty, what they say, intuition or knowledge a priori. That you have knowledge, direct, objective of something. You can experience a plant as if you were the plant itself. And that gradually through philosophy and through the kind of degeneration of the involution of the Aryan race, that this natural faculty that was in Egypt, that was in the older civilizations, basically has been started to be atrophied. And so from there we had the birth of philosophy and the birth of this democracy and all these different things that went to Rome. And then from Rome you had the conquest of Gaul there, and the conquest of the north. And I know a lot of people say different things in different histories, but our understanding of that esoterically and spiritually is that conquest was actually a divine mission of mixing the races, of bringing the Greek through the Egypt Greek, the Roman, up into the northern hemisphere, specifically into this country, and into a lot of places in Europe. And that's why you have this anomaly of from the time of Christ to 1066 of the Arthurian age, which no one can really define, and no one can really no one really has the history or the physical facts of this age. It's something that's been actually obliterated from our history. And something I want to say here as well, that even though it says indigenous wisdom, I want that to understand that really there are two types of indigenous. There are the people who live in the nature, who live in their traditions, and there are displaced indigenous who are thrown off their land, who have been robbed, who have lost their traditions or are having their traditions stolen. And that means that every single one of us is a displaced indigenous, because we all have Celtic blood, and we all have the right to this land which God and which Pachamama gave us, which has been robbed from us, magically as much as everything else. But our understand of this date, 1066, England was christened on 25th of December 1066. That's William the Conqueror came and did his conquering, and then after so many months they actually had this ceremony in London, in a place that was an original sacred site, and there they did a magical ritual to give birth to this idea of Britain, of England. And there we started this false history from 1066, and that's for one of the reasons why, unless you're psychic, you're not going to know much before 1066, or unless you have contact with groups that look into the earth mysteries. And so, from there, in the Celtic period itself, or in the North European, like the White European, you also have the evolution going up from the time of Christ up to, you can say, how would you say, that Roman warrior, Arturus. That this guy, and although I don't know for sure, I got a feeling that they've mixed a lot of myths there and put it into this guy, this warrior, this guy Arthur, which may have been his name, I don't know. But also, this is the same pattern that's happened in Latin America, because there was a liberator in Latin America called Simón Bolívar. And there is so much, when you hear his stories and what he went through in the battles, you can see that this guy was protected magically, that this guy had a divine mission. And the amount of situations he got out of, you just think this guy must have had something magical going on. And really, there's been a lot of myths and a lot of legends around Simón Bolívar through his liberation of Latin America. And that is the same pattern that goes on with Arthur as well, and the liberation there. And my understanding of the thing of the knighthood and the chivalry and all this, that these groups, because they had the divine right of kings, or the divine, divinely chosen monarchy. That the monarchy, if you like, or the kings and queens of that day, were not necessarily the genetic monarchy, but they were ones who, in terms of a spiritual brotherhood, that there were spiritual brotherhoods like the different knightly orders, Knights of the Holy Grail, Knights of the Round Table, that if that's a spiritual brotherhood, then obviously it's a spiritual family, so it's a royal family. And the person who gets on the throne is the one who initiates the will of the people. And so here you have people initiating the will of the people, which we call democracy, and people who are the kings and queens, which we call monarchy. So here we have these two concepts that have been split up, but originally, in the original Celtic system, it was not divided. That the king and the queen was doing the will of the people, because they were one with the land, and that they had a service to perform. And if you think of this system of, obviously it doesn't please a lot of people to think, imagine there's a group of us and this one person is our leader. It sounds a bit cultish and it doesn't sound, very appealing. But really this is how the shamanic communities and the shamanic tribes, how they are. Because they still have one person who is, the channel, the conduit between the world of the spirits, the world of Pachamama, and all his people. And he is there at service to his people. He's not on some, to try and get privileges. And this is something that comes up in the Bible as well, saying the greatest among you is the servant of everyone. And here is something key to what we say of the spiritual hierarchy. There's not a case of I'm higher up in the spiritual hierarchy, therefore I can treat you guys, with contempt. But the one who is higher up in the spiritual hierarchy is the one who is more able to serve humanity, to serve everyone. This is quite interesting here. And there's obviously, in these times, there's a lot of talk of brotherhoods, of society, secret brotherhoods, of what we call the Freemasons and all this. And if you trace the Freemasons, you can see it comes from the Templars. If you trace the Templars, you can see it comes from the Knights. If you trace these holy knight orders, you can see it comes from Greece, the Romans, Greece and Egypt. And so there is a link that goes on there. But when it got into Freemasonry, obviously they were started being attacked very strongly by what traditions say as fallen angels, or as beings who are incarnated in this planet, who have been, you could say, almost the enemies of the human family, who are not here to help, or are not here to advance anything at all, that they almost hear as a mistake. And this is something that a lot of mystics have said in South America, that what is going on in this planet is an error of the gods. That there's something here that happened back in Lemuria. They say the earth plates were basically all moving and everything was volatile, and they needed something to stabilize the plates. And so advanced beings came here, very advanced beings. They were only here for themselves a very short time, just for them probably a few days, a few weeks. For us, that was 80,000 years in the space of Lemuria. And these beings, in order to stabilize the planet, they gave to us they changed the human being, its magnetism, because up to that point the human being had its kundalini and it was active through the chakras, and they say put an actual, like, a physical organ in our coccyx, and this physical organ made the magnetism of the human being project into the earth, and this made the earth stabilize. That the earth stabilized through this genetical modification, if you like, the way that these beings came. And these weren't evil beings. They say these were very advanced, and our humanity back then was advanced, and these beings to them were advanced. And these beings are, if you like, more like gods and angels, and they came thinking they were doing good because they wanted to stabilize the planet. And you speak, or you hear what mystics say about the consequences of them doing good, is that this humanity today has come to such a dense material consciousness that when we close our eyes, all we see is blackness. Whereas in the past, when we close our eyes, we would see the stars and the cosmos, because that's where we came from. And so these beings, who are good beings, who are angels and gods, they were trying to do good, and they did not see that this humanity was going to fall as it did. And then they say later after that came the fall from Eden. And they have something interesting, because they say with this magnetism that projects downwards, this is what is the root of ego. Whereas the spirit wants to go up and wants to reach the heavens, ego wants to go and make everything denser and everything more solid. It wants to go down. It wants to sort of go down into into the other worlds, the inferior worlds. If you put this in context with what it says in the Apocalypse, that there are 7 churches, and that these 7 churches the seals of these churches are going to open, and that all the consequences of this humanity, all the processes are basically going to start coming, and then there's going to be destruction by fire, is what they say. In context of what the Indigenous say of the roots of this humanity, this fits in, because the 7 churches would be the 7 chakras, and in that sense, the breaking open of these 7 seals are the processes that the Mayans have basically marked on this on the date of 2012, as basically that day is when these processes of the 7 churches in the Apocalypse are basically going to start opening. And we understand that as in there's going to be a big purification on this planet, and that purification is the removal of the egoic forces and the removal of what you could say the Luciferic forces on this planet, which have made this cult of personality and have made the society. You can only live in society with ego. It's practically impossible to be in society and to not, well, at least have personality. That's, it's made for that. It crystallizes that, but that's not the natural way, because nature is very different. Has very different laws. Going back to the thing of what the Celtic thing, and that 1066 was marked the point where memory started. You think of a child doesn't have any memory. As soon as memory comes in, things start going a bit wrong, because you have this idea, this theory of what life should be like, and you start putting your memory there. So the British, English people have this memory of 1066 onwards, which is really, you could say, like the false culture, like the personality, which is not really the spirit. And from there we've had this culture which then became very destructive, then went and colonized the rest of the world. And I've heard mystics say there that the Europeans, that force that moved over to the New World was what they call the Red Horse. And that was like the first horse of the 4 horses. I can't actually remember the colour sequence. And see, the 4 horses of the Apocalypse. And the same thing there, And here you have something interesting with all of the Americas. That's the new land, and it has the first sub-root race that was in Tibet and in China, but there, almost in its pristine condition. You have Africans going there as well, from the slavery and from all things there. Our understanding, or what we've been told about the Africans, is that they are Aryan, but they were, marked black because of their karma, because they were an ancient tribe that came from either Atlantis or Lemuria, and that they were literally put aside as in they have a karma to pay. And with the white European that came and basically took them into slavery and is even now still abusing Africa, they are paying their karma. And they are now included in this 7th sub-race, which has gone to Latin America, and there you have the white European, you have the indigenous there themselves, you have the Africans, you have people all over the world going into Latin America and creating this ethnic hot pot. Which is interesting because when you think of Che Guevara and you see his face everywhere and you see things of Che Guevara, and I once went to Hackney, I saw Cliche Guevara, and I liked that. I thought, well, I see it so many times I don't even know what Che Guevara really means. But after going to Latin America, I understand more of what that symbol actually means, because he was from Argentina, went up through Chile, through Paraguay, to Peru, went to Guatemala, went to Mexico, went to Cuba, made a revolution, and he felt himself as a Latin American, as one people. He felt himself as if all these people from the bottom of Latin America to Mexico and Cuba, that this is one race, that this is one people, that they were united. And you speak to people there about this idea and they feel the same. They feel that all the Latin Americans are united. And how weird that is when you come here and this country is called United Kingdom, and we couldn't be more divided, amongst ourselves. And then you have this thing of the anomaly of North America, or United States. And they say the original Freemasons that created the United States, their intentions were good. And what they wanted was to make a society which was like the ethnic hot pot of all the races, where the dream of humanity liberating itself could come to fruit. And it did not work, as you can probably guess. There's something to be said there about human beings, or someone trying to speed up a process, someone trying to make something happen. But if it's not in accordance with divine law, then that experiment is due to fail. It's something that happens with healing and Indigenous as well, that someone can only heal someone if the divine law permits it. And that divine law permits it if the person being healed is willing to change the thing in their psychology which has made them ill. And if someone goes and makes a healing on someone and that person is not willing to make the psychological change, then they themselves could break the spiritual laws that have given that person that illness. And these are laws which really are beyond the scientific laws that we understand. These are, divine laws. Very important to keep in mind as well, that if someone is given a healing, to always pray that the healing is in accordance with divine law. And so, where am I going there? Nobody counts for the terms. The next bit I was going to say was involving a projector thing about London, about the earth energies there. What time is it? How long have I got? Because I could go into...
just under 15 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to have to skip that bit in that case. But that was going to lead on into another bit. But really, London, what we see as the capital, was an ancient old site there. And you have the Thames, which was in the old day called the Dragon. And that wherever a river meanders, in that point there where the river sort of comes close to itself, that there, you can say the earth energy, the river dragon energy, kind of accumulates and goes over that point of river. And you go to London, you see that point exactly, there's a great big tower with a pyramid on top of that. On the other side, on the west side of this river, you have the City of London, which is the financial centre of the entire world. As it's, that's their centre in the City of London. So the energy through the Thames goes through Oxford, the educational place. It goes through London. It collects all the energy from the City of London, the money, and it hits that point there on that pyramid, which is a financial building. And then it goes down, and there's a dome on the other side of that thing, which is the Millennium Dome. And you get the Cleopatra's Needle, you get the dome, and the two magically are used for ritual to bring something more into manifestation. So there you have the money coming in, or the energy of the finance, crystallizing there on this dragon energy of the Thames, and going into the Millennium Dome. Well, Millennium Dome is nothing, but the Millennium Dome is exactly at 0 Greenwich Mean Time. The Greenwich, the observatory is exactly south of that. And we wonder why we say today time is money. It's a magical thing that they've done on this land to have made this idea of time is money, and have turned it into, well, a reality to some, to a lot of people. But the Indigenous did not have this thing as time as money. Time were processes and time were cycles. And for them, money was the original meaning of the word economy, because you have the word eco, economy, which is the relationship one has with the environment, that is all okay. an example in this in the Scottish tribes is that every family would grow rye or barley, and then once they had enough for their own bread, the families would share that rye in amongst their tribe and make beer. So all the families would share beer in the tribe. And if there was enough that left there, all the tribes put their excess together and made whiskey, and that whiskey was shared out amongst everyone. So you had the families that made their bread, the excess, they made the beer which united the tribe, and then the excess went to all the clans which united all of them. And that, if you like, is a symbol of like the natural economy. That is not like I've got more than you, I've got to get you down in order to get me up. That the natural economy is based on that, of everyone flourishing and everyone doing well. So, I spoke earlier about the thing of fallen orders and fallen kind of esoteric orders, like as you get with the Freemasonry, which have gone so far now. You have the Illuminati, illuminated one, which was originally a spiritual thing. You have the skull and bone, which was also originally a Christic thing, because the skull is the cross, and the skull in the Bible it say Golgotha, and Christ takes the cross up to Golgotha. He takes the cross to the skull. And so the original pirates, pirate, men of fire, that they were the Templars who were fleeing in the boats. And then, little by little, all these orders have basically fallen, and to the point now that they are these secret brotherhoods that are controlled by the same egoic forces that is basically running amok on the planet. And but it's interesting there they use the word brotherhood. You know, they say, if I say the word brotherhood, everyone thinks, oh, you mean these people. And it's such a shame, because that word has been contaminated, because, these guys are not brothers. They don't treat each other like brothers. They might do for a bit to hide each other's crimes and each other's sins, but they do not, it's a brotherhood out of guilt. They're not actually really united in spirit. But yet you have these tribes, for instance, the Kogi, and they call us younger brother. They don't say they're big brother, they just call us younger brother, and they just would like us to grow up and be, brothers. But they're not in society. They're in their mountain, they're far away, and they do not want any contamination from our society. As much as possible, they're trying to be hermetic. And yet we have this other brotherhood, supposedly, who have their fingers in every single pie everywhere, who call themselves Big Brother, and they're not. This is something very false, and something that I've heard people say, and the shamans say there, is that these people are in for a very, very big fool, because they want the empire of capitalism, of materialism, of growth. They want this empire to go on and on and on and on. They believe it's going to go on for 1,000 years, and they're heading for that. And they are going to be very upset when these processes and what they say in the apocalypse is kicking off. And that's why a lot of people read the apocalypse and they feel offended what it says there, because we're going through these immense processes, extremely terrible, and yet the angels are in heaven applauding and being happy. Well, they're not being happy because we're suffering, they're being happy because these people that are, if you like, the kind of the pyramid cap for all the egoic forces, that they are having their bases shaken apart and torn down. And so what does it really mean to be in a brotherhood? And what does it really mean to be in these initiations? And what are these esoteric orders that basically started spiritual, started very much in the light, and now our understanding of them is of demonic forces? And whenever we hear these words of order or initiation or things like this, a lot of people immediately associate with Illuminati and this. But this comes from something much more ancient. And in this context, one can use the sacred plants of Pachamama as the means to get into initiation. Because what they say there, and what the mystic I've heard wise men say over in South America, is that the true, they have the initiation ceremony and all this. The ceremony is one thing, but actually to get to that initiation, it's marked, if you like, not by how many psychic powers you have, not by you saw this colour and you heard these people think that. These initiations are marked by how much one feels himself to be a brother to all of humanity, to all of the plants, to all of the rocks, to everything on this planet, because that is the big brotherhood, all of us as one family. And the real initiation and the real, order, the real spiritual order, is marked by how much we feel ourselves to be brothers of everyone, of the plants as well, as much as everything. Going to sing of the plants here is, I thoroughly recommend that people look into and try and investigate the use of these magical plants from their original tradition. I say that because there are a lot of traditions which have used the magical plants. For instance, you can go on an ayahuasca holiday, and the people, oh, you're new, well come, here's the plant here, you can cook it, da, 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 da. They let you do everything. And the real shamans who know their stuff, they know that is blasphemy, because they know that these plants are sacred, that the Pachamama is something absolutely sacred, and they themselves treat the earth and the plant as if it was the altar, in the church, something immensely sacred that they have there, which has been disconnected from our society. We go to buildings, or we go to places, or to altars, we see feathers and bells, and we take that as a symbol. But what the indigenous have as sacred is the earth itself. A real shaman is not going to have his plants where everyone can see him. Only he knows, and those close to him know where his plants are, his medicinal plants. In that sense, they are working what you can say devotional service, or what the Hare Krishnas call Bhakti Yoga, which is in the back of Bhagavad Gita, which I'd like to speak about here, because the indigenous have this as something key in their life, and we have to read it through books and try and understand it. And Bhakti Yoga is the yoga of the art of devotion, the art of being able to connect to the spiritual hierarchy, to Father God and to Mother Earth. And for them, Bhakti Yoga is through devotional work with the plants, caring for the plants, and specifically with the sacred plants that they have there. For them, it's something unspeakably sacred. And here, going from here, going there, and seeing the people there, then coming back here after contaminating them and picking up a bit of their vibes, and coming back here and experiencing life here again, there are certain things that sort of create a lot of shocks in this sort of transition. One, you go there and you see that the people, they are so simple, but not in a stupid way. They are simple. They say, like, real wealth is not how much you accumulate, but how little you need. And they have this sort of simplicity, which brings with it like a real spiritual happiness, because they are connected to all the elemental spirits, and they still have this. They still have those traditions intact. And also we go here, and we have so much academia and so many ideas and so many theories and things like this, which has a purpose, are very good. But often we can get so caught up in the theory that we disconnect from the being. And that happens in science, where science has become so intellectual that it's heartless. That science has no problem, like the drones that kill people. How heartless is that, to make a technology where you can kill people, in that way? But that's where the intellect has gone, to the point that it's almost disconnected itself from the qualities of the being. And so people go there and they think that they're simple, they think that they're stupid, but really these guys are in their being. These guys are not in the culture of personality. They're not in the culture of having to prove themselves or have exams or things like this. They are very much in the being, in the centre of the heart. And really you can say stuff to them of the history here, like one friend went up to a shaman there that he met and said, "Do you know about the New World Order and that they're trying to take over the world and all this?" And the guy was like, "Yeah, that came to us 500 years ago, what? Now it's landing on your doorstep, suddenly a problem, So these people know from their heart, they knew this many, many eons ago, and it's in prophecies. And so this is something which really is a role for us, in order to us to be more in the being. It's necessary to balance intelligence with the being, because intelligence without the being makes tyrants, but the being without intelligence makes, you could say, saintly fools, and people who give away everything, but are not capable of really, how to say. There's a story in the Bible of the two brothers, and one has all the spiritual inheritance, the older brother, and he hands over that spiritual inheritance to his younger brother, who's fooled him into it because he's hungry. He's absolutely starving. He says, "Well, if you give me your spiritual inheritance, I'll give you a plate of lentils." And he's still hungry. He's like, "Yes." And they have this exchange. And that plate of lentils is the plight of the indigenous people, because they have the spiritual inheritance of the entire planet. They're intact, and yet every day they are handing it over because they are hungry and because they are lacking the things which basically they have the right to have. That's as much as I think I can talk. If anyone's got a question, you might have to ask me outside, because I think the next guy is now going to speak. I'm not sure where he is. But thank you very much for listening. Okay.
Debt Free TV, in association with GetOutOfDebtFree.org.